It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday morning at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. Japan's Junji Ito is something of a Stephen King in the world of manga. And honestly, it would maybe be more accurate to say that he falls more in line with writers like H.P. Lovecraft or Clive Barker, considering his typical work deals with concepts and perceptions barely imaginable to his characters and, well, us as the audience. But I hate to admit this, but as a massive comic book fan, and the fact that I know a few of his books, basic plots and whatnot, I've actually never read any of Ito's tomes. I mean, it's not for a lack of desire, but for a lack of opportunity and time up to this point. But what I did watch was last year's October Marvel on Adult Swim, Uzumaki. Now, Uzumaki is among the horror master's most notable works, and we'll be diving into that in decent enough detail soon. But to start, let's talk about Ito himself. He was born in 1963 in Shakashida, a town located in the southern half of Japan's larger island, Honshu, and a little south from Tokyo. Now, Ito's fascination with horror started from a very early age. He cites Mummy Teacher by Kazuo Umezu as his first manga, and coupled with that fascination of horror manga, Ito grew up in a house that had an underground bathroom often infested with spider crickets. Now, these are both things that would later influence his style of writing or make appearances in, as far as in some form, within his stories. And I believe that house that he lived in was something of one of those row houses that is used very heavily in Uzumaki. But into his early 20s, Ito was ready to start making a name for himself as a manga writer and artist. He submitted a story in the Kazuo Umezu Prize, a contest held by Japanese manga magazine Monthly Halloween, and he finished with an honorable mention. His idol, Umezu, was one of the judges who actually reviewed his work, and that would ultimately become a long-running serialized story that had a 13-year life. And that story was the first of Ito's major contributions to the medium and of horror itself. And that was Tomi was the name of that. It was a story of an immortal girl whose admirers would ultimately go insane. In fact, there's a character in Uzumaki that has a similar scenario where her admirers kind of become obsessed with her. But Tomi would later be adapted into a series of horror films between 1998 and 2011. But in 1998, Ito began publishing the series that we're here to talk about, the adaptation for this week, Uzumaki. And the story would ultimately run for 19 volumes between 1998 and 99, appearing in the magazine Big Comic Spirits, and eventually get a live-action film adaptation right away in 2000. Big Comic Spirits is what's known as a seinen manga magazine. Now, seinen is one of the four main demographical categories in manga. Think of it as a slightly broader concept than a genre. Seinen is the editorial category that's usually aimed at younger adult men. So like people who are between the ages of maybe 18 and 25. Now, the inspiration for Uzumaki, which is the Japanese word for swirl, and sometimes has been translated into the word spiral, comes from Ito's own youth. In Japan, there are traditional terraced houses that are often built into long strings, and he wanted to tell the story of how people would make incremental changes that would ultimately twist these people into folks with strange forms of or strange obsessions, and in order to build the scope of how long this string of houses is for a story, he was inspired by something referred to as a mosquito coil, and this is an incense that repels the pesky bugs. And what's more, he realized that spirals were often representative in a positive light in media, and they are kind of an aesthetically pleasing shape when you see it. It's a very easy thing to draw, and it's something that people kind of just recognize as something, and they're kind of drawn into. So why not subvert that into something that can create horror by way of a curse? So let's dive into this 4-part miniseries to delve into how the spiral curse of Uzumaki begins to infect this small town. And this is the tale of the strange happenings in the town of Kurozo. And at Kurozo Station, Shuichi arrives at the station on a train, and he goes to school out of town. And he's met at the station by Kyrie, his girlfriend. And as they walk home, he asks her if she ever thought about leaving the town altogether. And she isn't quite sure what he means by that. And he asks if she's noticed the things happening in the village. Whirlpools have been appearing in pretty much every body of water that's inside this village. There's a pond in the middle of the village. There are these little creeks that run to that pond. Everywhere, these little whirlpools are starting to show up. Shuichi then tells a spooky story of how his father is starting to change. He's no longer going to work. He has a very short temper. He's become obsessed with spirals. Even his eyes can move in spiraling circles independently of one another. Kyrie doesn't know what else to do but laugh at this. But when she comes home, Shuichi's father is talking to Kyrie's artist and sculptor father about commissioning a piece that has spirals in it. Now, at school, Kyrie is talking to a girl named Azami and notices a scar on her forehead, a little crescent-shaped scar, while Azami is telling a story about how difficult it is for her to find boys that she likes. You see, she has this strange condition in which when boys see that little scar, they're almost uncontrollably attracted to her. When Kyrie introduces Azami to Shuichi, he sees the scar and runs away with Kyrie, telling her that the girl has a spiral forming on her forehead. And sure enough, when Azami confronts Shuichi for him not being attracted to her, the scar has gone from a crescent to a full-on spiral. And before Shuichi's father died, Kyrie tries to deliver the piece that her father made for him, but he says that he realizes he can make his own spirals, and he sticks his now elongated tongue out and starts twisting it into a curl. Shuichi tells Kyrie how his father ultimately died. Contrary to what he and his mother told others, they said that he fell down the stairs. He and his mother actually found him stuffed into a chest, a circular chest, and he was twisted into a spiral with every bone in his body broken so that he could fit himself into that shape. Now, when Shuichi's father is cremated, the smoke drifted into the air and formed a spiral cloud. And his mother sees an image of her husband in the smoke, and the spiral unwinds itself into the pond in the middle of the town, which is now almost constantly a whirlpool. Shuichi's mother is driven insane by all of this and driven into a madness anytime she sees or talks about spirals, going so far as cutting her own fingerprints off of her hand and the tips of her toes because they also have prints on them, spiraling prints. At school, there is a boy that everybody calls Slowpoke. And basically they always are calling or saying, oh, Slowpoke is as slow as a snail because he talks slowly, he walks slowly, he's constantly late for school, he's constantly late for classes. But when the bullies at the school begin to pick on Slowpoke by stripping him naked and like kind of kicking him out into the hallways of the school to embarrass him, they notice that there's a giant spiral forming on his back. Later, when Kyrie sees Azami, the girl seems confused. She says that she can't seem to focus, and she asks Kyrie to take a look at her face. and a spiraling vortex is starting to consume her entire head, even sucking one of her eyeballs down into that vortex. And as the vortex grows larger and larger, it even consumes a boy who has an obsessive crush on Azami before the vortex consumes her completely. Kyrie narrates that she hadn't realized yet that all these horrors, that she's already experienced, was just the beginning of this town's descent into the spiral. Now later, Slowpoke is getting even slower. His spiral growth on his back is swelling larger and larger, becoming more of like a hump than anything else. There's a star-crossed couple whose parents do not like one another, and they're spending a lot of secret time together. They're kind of like a Romeo and Juliet of this town. But as they're kind of hiding out in one of the row houses in this town, they see two snakes begin to mate, and they're twisting and spiraling around one another, ultimately becoming something of a braid at this point, that is like a sentient braid that slithers away. But Kyrie learns from another schoolgirl that the town is allowing burials again instead of cremations, because anytime anyone from Kurozu is cremated anywhere in the world, spirals appear in the smoke. Shuichi tells Kyrie that whenever the spiral touches someone, they are driven to draw others' attention to the spirals. And he then notes that Kyrie's hair is kind of gotten longer all of a sudden. And the next day at school, Kyrie's ever-growing hair is now curling into its own, well, you guessed it, spirals. Slowpoke then reveals to everyone else at school that he's been transformed into a snail person. Now, using that distraction of him slithering up the side of the school building, Kyrie goes to a stylist and asks the woman to cut all of her hair off. But as the stylist starts to do the haircut, her hair attacks the stylist, and she's forced to leave. And when she gets home, Kyrie's parents say they need to take her to the hospital because, rebelling against being removed, Kyrie's own hair begins to strangle her. But soon, Kyrie realizes that anyone who looks at her spiraling locks of hair becomes transfixed and obsessed with spirals, unknowingly spreading the curse even further. Now, things get even stranger in Kyrie's life. A girl jealous of the attention that she's getting decides to design her hair just like Kyrie's, leading to a big hair fight between the two girls in front of the entire school. Slowpoke's chief bully has also turned into a snail person, and these two snails ultimately mate with one another because snails don't really have sex. They both possess, or they all possess both features so that they can ultimately propagate their species. But after they mate with one another, they disappear, leaving behind a pile of eggs. Now, Kyrie has another suitor, a kid from her school. He's so obsessed with Kyrie that he decides to stop a speeding car with the power of his love. The car does not stop, and he becomes wrapped around the front wheel of the car. You guessed it, in a spiral kind of twist. Shuichi is able to help Kyrie by cutting her hair off when she's kind of engulfed him with his hair. And those two kids whose parents hate each other, they're trying to run away from the town, but they're ultimately caught by their fathers. And before they can be brought back home, those two kids twist themselves into long strands, and then they intertwine with each other, just like those mating snakes they saw earlier, making it impossible for them to ever be separated again. They ultimately slither out into the sea and disappear. At least they're together, I guess, right? But on that very night, the Black Lighthouse, which had been left abandoned for years, started shining its light again as if to help the curse spread as far as possible. It burns some people touched by the light and making others begin to walk in spirals. That boy who got killed by the car that he couldn't stop with his love for Kyrie, he's actually resurrected by the light and pops out of his grave, just like his nickname namesake, a Jack-in-the-Box. Now, Kyrie is in the hospital after rescuing her little brother from the lighthouse. She had badly twisted her ankle. But while there, she learns that there has been an infestation of mosquitoes in the town. And those mosquitoes, for some reason, are specifically attacking pregnant women. And one of those women is Kyrie's cousin. And people start turning up dead with thousands of little stab wounds on their body and completely drained of blood. These are the people in the hospital. Shuichi says that only female mosquitoes carrying eggs suck blood. And late one night, Kyrie discovers all the pregnant women roaming the halls of the hospital as if in a trance or as if they're like zombies, basically. And they're all carrying drills with them. And they're drilling holes in the patients and sucking their blood dry. And when Kyrie is discovered by the horde of them, and this includes her own cousin, they attempt to kill her until she uses bug spray to basically scare them off. During the day, the pregnant women seem normal, but Kyrie cannot convince the doctors or nurses of what she saw the night before. Babies born from some of those infected pregnant women are starting to oddly regrow their placentas in the form of what look to be mushrooms that have spirals on top of them. The more people infected by the spirals, the more they want to eat the mushrooms. And also the pregnant women specifically want to eat the mushrooms because these placenta mushrooms are very rich in blood. Of course. Now, upon returning home from the hospital, it's clear Kyrie's father has been infected by the spirals. The only sculptures and art that he's been making include spirals and ghastly visages of faces in the paintings. Shuichi breaks open her father's kiln where he does a lot of his pottery and bakes the pottery before he paints it. And ultimately, a bunch of people that are trapped inside, a lot of spirits that were trapped inside, basically pour out into spiraling shapes. It seems to break the spiral's hold over Kyrie's father for a little while, but soon a typhoon comes to town and settles over the village and stays put in an odd holding pattern directly over the village. And the spiraling eye of the storm calls Kyrie's name like an obsessed lover. And after losing their house, Kyrie and her family move into the old row houses that are in the middle of the village. And they live next door to a woman who cries and moans constantly in sorrow after her son had died. And it's because he's basically been twisted into a spiral. She's got spirals kind of like breaking out of her own skin. So they're already living next door to somebody who's infected as well. But another neighbor who falls in love with Kyrie upon first sight begins to grow similar spiraling spikes all over his body that the old woman and her son had. And he attacks Kyrie, but is killed by an uprooted tree from a second typhoon that has come into town. And her other admirer, the Jack-in-the-Box, suddenly shows back up with his torso hopping around on a spring that's been pulled from the car's the car's suspension that hit him and that wrapped him around the tire. As the final episode starts, we see a news crew driving into Kurozu to cover the typhoons as a story. But as soon as they enter the town, the car is wrecked by a tornado that tears down the road. The woman reporter with this crew steps out and said that she feels something strange in the air right away. She looks up to see a news chopper that is trying to report on the city, but it gets pulled from the sky by another tornado. Kyrie and her little brother tell the reporter to hide to avoid a group of tornadoes that are basically rampaging through the town. And these tornadoes are actually piloted by boys who were part of a local gang that are using the tornadoes as a way to basically run amok. With all of the chaos that's going on, they're just using it for an excuse to smash things. Now, too much noise, too quick of movements, anything more than a whisper or a soft step can basically trigger one of these tornadoes to come by and take you away. Ultimately, it will basically dump you into the spiraling pond in the middle of the town. Now, originally, Kyrie's family has taken people who lost their homes to the typhoons in, but ultimately, those people kick out the family for more room in the cramped house. And as Kyrie, her family, and the reporters seek another place to hide, Kyrie says there have been more and more snail people popping up as of late. In fact, that gang of guys who piloted the tornadoes, they are now eating those snail people. There's no other food around, so they might as well eat what is plentiful, and that's these snail people. Those people who took over Kyrie's family's row house, well, they've become a jumbled mess of flesh. As they continue to expand to get larger, they start rebuilding the row houses to essentially keep themselves hidden. And in the sea, the Japanese Navy has sent ships to patrol and possibly help them, but the sea creates a giant whirlpool and drags all of the ships down into the sea, basically destroying them. Kyrie, Shuichi, her little brother, and the reporter try to walk out of Kurozo, but Kyrie's brother is starting to turn into a snail person too. And they soon realize all the roads loop back onto themselves, proving that there's no way out of the cursed village. And after Kyrie's brother turns into a snail, she, the reporter, and Shuichi carry on, only to return to the town to find all of the row houses are now basically this massive never-ending spiral. And they soon learn that it has been years since they first attempted to leave. They haven't aged, but the city or the town has, and the person who is helping build the row houses and all of the people inside the row houses have been doing this for years. The reporter is eventually pulled into the spiral row house, and Shuichi and Kyrie continue on to the center of the houses, which is that pond, Dragonfly Pond, where it seems the spirals begin and end. The pond, now dried, reveals a giant spiral staircase leading into the earth. And at the bottom of the stairs, near a giant spiral ruins or a temple, Kyrie discovers a bunch of people twisted into stringy spirals, including her own mother and father. They are merging with the spiral ruins. And Kyrie and Shuichi believe the ruins has basically become a living organism itself, and every number of years it requires more people to be drawn into it to be consumed. The couple no longer have the energy to continue fighting the curse, and they end up twisting into each other, the final victims of the spiral curse. Some years later, a new town now exists on top of the ruins of Kurozo. And similarly to how the story began, this time a boy waits for a girl to get off the train, who then asks the boy if he ever thought about leaving the town as spirals begin to form in the water and clouds. Let's talk about 3 things I like about this anime miniseries. First, I very much enjoy the extremely clean black and white look of the animation. It looks like it is basically taken directly from the pages of a manga itself. In some ways, the clean whiteness in between the strokes of black, forming shapes and images, kind of comes off as something nearing innocence or purity. And as the story becomes more infected by this curse, the more crowded the imagery is. It's not quite as clean of images, but done so in very small, hardly recognizable ways at first. It just feels off. It's like you're Shuichi knowing something is wrong and having that sensation kind of eat away at you while you try to put your finger on why this doesn't have the same look in the third or fourth part compared to the first. Also, as people become infected by the spirals, you can see their eyes darken with hash marks that indicate shadows, but also indicate that they've lost some of their innocence and purity too. For not much more than white, gray, and black being used, there's a lot of vibrance to the art that make the visuals of the animation beautiful to look at. Next, I would not be terribly surprised if the miniseries left some fans of the manga wanting. Uzumaki is a hefty book by Ito. It's not likely something that can be summarized in what effectively becomes a 4-part miniseries totaling only about 2 hours. The 3 volumes making up the manga is nearly 650 pages. Even people like myself who like this miniseries will say there is a little bit of a pacing issue, sure. Each episode seems to tell 2 stories each, and it doesn't really give you any idea how much time it jumps forward from one story to the next. One moment, Shuichi's father is alive and accepting a package. He's going on and on about spirals and everything. The very next, everyone is at his funeral. The series jumps forward very quickly into the next thing that happens before you can even figure out what just happened before that. That said, I do look at this miniseries almost like a Twilight Zone anthology series of sorts. The best part of this entire miniseries, at least the scariest, is the first half of the 3rd episode. This is when Kyrie is in the hospital healing from taking a tumble down the stairs of the town's lighthouse. There's already spooky stuff going on because Shuichi's mother is there slowly losing her sanity when she begins seeing and hearing her dead husband and realizing that there is indeed a spiral inside of each of us. Well, actually, there are 2 spirals inside of each of us. Each ear has a cochlea. So she's freaking out about that, being haunted, and ultimately cutting those out of her own head. I believe she actually ends up killing herself from doing that because you never see her again after you see her pick up the scissors and ponder whether she should stick it into her ear. But then you have the pregnant women who all turn into vampiric mosquito people who are going around and sucking the blood out of the other patients. It's a very spooky episode, and the women getting twisted into monsters, their eyes going white, their desire to kill anyone and everyone, which is really kind of interesting because most of the time you think of the motherly instinct as to protect life. Now they are out there killing life. It's really good. It's an eerie set of scenes that end with a doctor even assisting some of the pregnant women to help grow these gross placenta mushrooms that are full of blood. Also, one of the infected pregnant women trying to kill people is Kyrie's own cousin. As strange and otherworldly the other horror elements are in this series, this portion of that episode is the most viscerally horrific, and it's really well done. Now, lastly, kind of piggybacking off of that, I do love the tone of this series. It's kind of disturbingly quiet at times. Yes, there are music stings here and there, or sometimes a loud yell, but there is a lot of soft and quiet moments in between those things too. This miniseries, like I said earlier, came along in October of last year, and it was something I was watching every Sunday morning during one of my most favorite times of the year. It's soft and quiet, kind of dreamy, but also has this nightmarish tone. And that is the strong point of this whole thing. One of the curious things about the entire story is that it seems like Kyrie, despite all of these things that happened to her from very early on in the story, she never gets all that wild or overly worried about any of it. Shuichi is the one who is, for a lack of a better word, spiraling. He knows something is wrong. He tries to explain what's going on. He reacts to what's going on. But Kyrie is kind of I don't know, floating through the story. It's her friend that has a vortex on her head that sucks herself into oblivion. It's her hair that grows long and into crazy spirals. It's her cousin that attempts to suck her dry. Yet she mostly remains really even throughout the entire story. She doesn't lose sleep or stop eating. She barely recoils from the sight of spirals. It's like someone that's, I don't know, I guess detached from reality. It's like she's sleepwalking while she's trapped in a dream or a nightmare. And that kind of helps with the whole idea of it jumping from one part of this curse to the very next thing, kind of unexpectedly. You kind of don't have your bearings down, and you were dealing with one thing, and all of a sudden it goes to a commercial break and you come back and you're dealing with something completely different. That whole vibe carries through the entirety of the miniseries. Things happen to Kyrie, and she barely has a chance to react to it before that next thing happens to her. She's contemplative, which creates those quiet moments in the story that then has that effect on the tone as a whole. It's a good watch for October, or when you want to kind of see something that's eerie, unsettling, and just maybe out of reach of your understanding of what the cause or the full impact this curse has, and what it means that it seems to be a recurring curse stuck in this small, poor village of fairly simple people. And I think that's kind of the point of it, is that Japanese horror tends to have a lot of curse and a lot of like past things having an effect on the current day, and these kind of poor villages that had all of these kind of more, these people living kind of more simple lives in these row houses that are often considered to be ghettos. There's something that hangs over that, and I think that's kind of the point of this curse, that it drags these people into this kind of oblivion, if you will. But it presents it in a more nightmarish, almost dreamlike quality. That the tone is very effective in this miniseries. But that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday afternoon at filmseizure.com. But don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Wednesday morning Film Seizure podcast and the Monday afternoon Monster Mondays podcast at your favorite podcast providers. We also upload the stuff to YouTube as well. You can also check out my website, bmovieenema.com, to read new reviews every Friday morning. Next time, let's take a tour into one of the most beloved and honored horror tales of Vincent Price's long storied career, 1953's House of Wax. So until next week, stay spooky.